Hello and welcome to the second lecture of this online training program on foundational education leadership for early childhood care and education. Today we are going to talk about Harvard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences and compare it with general intelligence theory. The multiple intelligence theory suggests that there is one dominant intelligence which musical, rhythmic, visual, spatial, verbal, linguistic, logical, mathematical, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. It proposes a differentiated strategy according to individual child's interest, intelligence, and competence. It suggests looking at one child at a time. This is in opposition to the general intelligence theory, which recommends a one-size-fits-all strategy. The GIT is based on the assumption that every child has same ability in all types of intelligences. In the current schooling system, how to implement this idea, however, remains a challenge. So let us understand this idea in greater detail. So we have to understand that these eight multiple intelligences, how these all can lead to various kinds of careers that can be cultivated for various kinds of individuals. So some of the children can have inclination and interest in some kind of intelligence, and they have can also have uh, a certain kind of a expertise in certain kind of intelligence. So how they can carve a career out of that kind of intelligence is very important to understand. So at the foundational stage, it is very important for a teacher or a teacher leader to expose children to these various kinds of intelligences, and then based on that identify which kind of intelligence the child is good at, and then based on that identification then nurturing in a certain kind of intelligence or expertise. Obviously one would argue that only nurturing a certain kind of intelligence would not do. One has to also ensure that there is certain kind of a ensuring of a backup strategy kind of a thing is also there. But apart from that, one has to ensure that what one is good at is trained in that. One person is first identified at what one is good at, and then one is trained in that kind of a intelligence, rather than falling trap to this whole idea that if someone is intelligent and someone has a good IQ, he will be willing to perform and will do good at most of the things, and the falling trap to this conventional notion of general intelligence theory. This multiple intelligences is the theory to fall to design education system accordingly. Now, if you look at the multiple intelligence, these are the eight kind of intelligences we are talking about. So the first one is naturalistic, that is understanding nature and organic processes. So someone who is good at this kind of a thing can be very good, maybe a physical scientist who can decipher a lot of physical laws and new physical laws. And it is not only about, so one often confuses that people who have logical and reasoning abilities, that is skilled at deductive reasoning, deductive patterns and logical thinking, will be a good scientist. But someone who is good at identifying patterns in nature, understanding nature and organic processes, will be a different kind of a scientist. uh, so both kind of expertise are required. Logical reasoning will be a more methodological expertise that is required, and naturalistic will be a more facet of a scientist who is more drawn to uh, deciphering new phenomena which can be tested later. But deciphering phenomena and more of a qualitative researcher kind of a person will have naturalistic kind of a tendencies. Then comes linguistic, a master of spoken and written language. So that is also very important. And if we see generally in the current academic system, linguistic and logical reasoning, these are the two facets of intelligence which is more given, emphasized on, and the training in this is more emphasized, as well as this is regarded as higher kind of intelligence, and this is the primary concern I have with this kind of a framework. We also have to understand that intelligences such as spatial, such as seeing and mapping the world in 3D. So that can provide you with, so say for example, we can take example of Lisa Randall, who is a mathematician who proposes 13 dimensions in string theory and all that. So those kind of intelligences are also very important, and these are all peculiar kind of intelligences, and these are required for the sciences to grow, for other kinds of intelligences to grow, for the human race to grow. But these are not very seen as very important in the normal state of affairs, and the economic system does not foster these kind of intelligences. So that is a very important concern I was to raise. Another concern I have with the other kind of intelligences, like musical intelligence, capacity to recognize, create, reproduce and reflect of music, and bodily and kinesthetic, using one's body in highly differentiated and skilled ways. So these two kinds of intelligences are very important with regards to maybe careers in music industry, in acting, maybe in sports and all that. But these kind of careers are not very much in sync with the academics, formal academics, and formal academics do not uh, foster these kind of careers. So we need to have a hard look at that, our academic system and the education system, and how it can foster these kind of intelligence. Coming to the interpersonal and intrapersonal kind of intelligence, interpersonal, that is communicating and reading people, and intrapersonal, understanding yourself, what you feel and what you want. So these two all kinds of intelligences are also very important. Intrapersonal intelligence people can turn out to be poets, and people who are intrapersonal intelligence help other people also decipher their life's meaning and all that. So that is why it's very important facet, and interpersonal people can turn out to be very important professionals in the human resources domain, and several other domains, for example marketing, as well as we can point a lot of other domains. So it is not about mapping the domains to intelligences at this point in time, but just to give a few examples. So from this, what you we understand is that there are several kinds of intelligence, but some kind of intelligence are more emphasized by the education system rather than other kinds of intelligence. Now coming to this EI Bank, Educational Innovation Bank, this is from the works of Vijay Serichand at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, and the website is www.inso.org. So if you visit this website, you will get a whole lot of teachers and their innovations, and I have been able to and fortunate to interact with a lot of these teachers, and what I have been able to garner from these interactions is that they believe that the general intelligence theory is not at work in the real scenario. In the real scenario, what is at work is actually the multiple intelligence theory, and we need to redesign and redefine our education system according to the multiple intelligence theory. So if we listen to the voices and pay deeper attention to the work of many innovative teachers, to know more, you can visit www.insort.org. As referred earlier, the Indian elementary education may need a major overhaul. It needs to break free from its decontextualized practices, rather a more contextualized education based on Gandhi's new Nai Talim or Harvard Gardner's multiple intelligence is the way forward. Giju Wai's child-centric approach, as discussed in his classic Diva Swapna, which is seen as a timeless approach to teaching, seems very timely in contemporary foundational and elementary education stages. Child-centric learning seems desirable from the point of view of multiple intelligence theory. It is in opposition to the general intelligence theory, which proposes for a homogenization of curriculum. One of the key things for creating a child-centric atmosphere is to develop a personal one-to-one relationship with children. Thus, a large class is not only undesirable but also detrimental to the approach. One more approach to develop a personal relationship with children is to get in touch with their parents. The mother can play a pivotal role in this regard, as she knows about the child the most. We need to understand that in this post-COVID era, this is going to be a very important period where people are thinking about foundational education from the home and homeschooling of their children in the kindergartens and grades 1 and 2. So in that regard, it is going to be a very important and likely change, and this kind of a change can bring about a very important dimension and add a very important dimension of multiple intelligence identification and exposure. So that kind of a feature. But I would like to advise, as a expert in education sector, I would like to advise the parents that they need not thrust upon their children their own failures and say that you need to pursue a career in this because I want you to, but rather they need to allow their children to pursue their careers according to their passion, interest, and inclinations. Moving further, we need to debunk this myth called gifted children. The concept of gifted children, that is, children who are gifted, is a very confused entity. We need to first understand that all children are gifted, and giftedness is more important to understand that gifted children. There are no such children, so as gifted and others as not gifted. All are gifted. The only thing is we don't and are incapable in identifying what kind of a gift the child has got. So that is the most important thing. The challenge for education leaders, however, especially at the foundational stage and for parents as well, is to identify that gift. And once you are able to identify that gift, then you will be able to nurture that and take that forward. So that is what you need to understand as a foundational education leader. The concept of gifted children or individual is a misnomer unless the reference points in the education life cycle when the child is called as gifted is clearly specified. It is beyond debate, however, that there are two phases to children's learning, one by virtue of inheritance, that is genetic, and other by virtue of practice in one's lifetime, that is learning. What I understand as giftedness is the generic aspect if the reference point is taken as birth. At any further point, rather that it is going to be a combination of both genetic as well as the learned aspects from the environment, either through planned training, unplanned and unplanned acquisition. In most cases, learned aspects will be a combination of both planned training and unplanned acquisition due to inability of adults to build a completely controlled environment for their younger ones. Based on innovative government elementary school teachers' views, one of the key findings of my research work during my thesis was that arts, sports, etc. should not be looked as co-curricular activities but as relevant career opportunities. Let us investigate this suggestion of teachers from an educational theory point of view. We find that we follow a general intelligence model of intelligence. While recent progress in educational research shows emergence of a multiple intelligence theory, the implication is that in our education system, we never tend to identify individuals with their distinct capabilities and categorize them accordingly. The individuals are never trained to compete within the formal education system. If it happens, also the scale is very limited. Thus, there is a lot of opportunity foregone by the education system to identify nurture through collaboration, competition, creating support structures in various fields and domains. Giftedness at a young age may vary from field to field, which is desirable from countries' progress in various fields and domains. This all is left to the market and in many cases market driven. Hence the progress also is slow and selective and not inclusive. The setting of Atal Tinkering laboratories in several schools throughout India can act as a game changer, but Atal Tinkering laboratories alone won't do. We have to set up laboratories which can cater not only to scientific temper but also to development of expertise in other intelligences domains which are called co-curricular in the current educational systems, maybe arts and sports. So that is also very important. So ATLs, for that matter, right now can act as data centers on all children in different schools across the country. Hence, they can help in identification of gifted children in different domains. Motivated teachers as resources can facilitate linkage between students and domain experts who can act as mentors. A lot of action-based research is required, utilizing the formal and newly found schools and governance structures for identification of giftedness at a young age, which according to my understanding will not be a function of inheritance but also of planned training and nurturing. It will happen only by creating a system in the existing structure which helps map the interest of children, then accordingly nurture them by collaboration, competition, support structures with the objective to fulfill national goals of winning Nobel Prizes, field medals, Olympic medals and Oscars, etc. So all of these are important. Not only Nobel Prizes and field medals, but also Olympic medals and Oscars are very, very important. So and creating the support structures at various levels for these kind of national goals is very important to ensure that giftedness is nurtured and giftedness in all children in various streams are nurtured, and so that there is a diversity of career options and those career options are pursued with all the passion as well as all the interest and inclination that is there, and that leads to, so we also need to relate it to the economic thing. So the economic thing is that everyone needs to have a fruitful career and it should earn him a certain kind of a living, and it should lead to fostering of the human race in terms of the skill set, in terms of the creativity, in terms of new kinds of innovation that is happening and new kinds of talent that is coming up, new kind of sports, new kind of art, architecture, creation, new kind of science and technology is coming up. So that will again happen if and only if you are able to nurture intelligences of different kinds. So that is becomes very important. And moving further, so that is why this strategy of one size does not fit all is very, very important. So one size fit all strategy is not going to work. You have to adopt a strategy where different multiple strategies are adopted and multiple intelligence theories adopted and multi-pronged strategies adopted. And in that context, this book by Nikhil Goyal is very, very important, how a student looks at schools and why he suggests that one should adopt a multi-pronged strategy towards education. So that becomes very important and a landmark book, and I will suggest all the participants to go through this book. Book review on this is prescribed as a reading, but I would suggest to buy this book and go through this book in totality to get a sense of what I am talking about in this regard. Coming to this whole idea of authentic child-centric learning. So, and from my thesis, what I have also find out is that this co-curricular activities is very important, and it is to be given more priority than the so-called academic, that is the intelligences in the fields of uh, logical reasoning, logical thinking and linguistic ability. But currently we are not doing that. We are considering arts and sports and intelligences in kinesthetic and musical intelligences are something secondary, and we are calling them co-curricular, and curricular as only linguistic intelligence and uh, intelligence in logical thinking, which is wrong. Authentic child-centeredness constitutes of finding interest and inclination of the children and in helping them learn accordingly. The focus then cannot be on scholastic achievements, rather, the attention must be on co-curricular activities. It is well proven that countries' development and growth is directly linked to the performance in the Olympics. Developing countries tend to produce Olympic medals at a lower cost. So, not only the economic growth increases, but also the efficiency of economic growth increases by way of diversifying the career options and are more efficient in producing Olympic medals. Thus, in terms of a strategy, it can be argued that the focus on broad-based curricula can not only be beneficial for the child but also for countries' economic development. Thinking from the perspective of the labor markets of different kinds of intelligences, heterogeneity in the curricula becomes an absolute necessity. The region is associated with different career durations and choices for people with different degrees of various intelligences. The concept of periodicity or cyclicity, heterogeneity, various tracks based on different intelligences, phases of identification and discipline development are important for creating a contextualized education system. One should note that the arts, sports, fruition cycle is at an earlier stage than that of academics, formal academics that we talk about. Thus, formal academics can act as a backup. The reverse, however, is untenable. The principle of backcasting rather than forecasting must be the public policy approach for the creation of labor markets. Labor markets should not be seen from the narrow perspective of industries. Education systems should not view arts, sports, games as co-curricular activities for all-round development. They should be seen as relevant career opportunities for future. The non-existent opportunities at national, state and district level must also be developed for some of the existing labor markets at the international level. These support structures at various levels for which there is a labor market at the international level is the way forward to design the economic system in congruence with the diversification of the education system. That is the way forward. Now let us understand what should be the strategy of the teacher leaders with regards to this whole idea of multiple intelligence theory and diversification of the education system. The teacher's objective should be that the students excel in different fields and not only in certain specific fields. The agenda should be that whatever the students do, they must be the best, and people must know and recognize them for the work. The teacher should be very prompt in not letting society to impose tax on different professions. Positive societal and parental attitude towards different professions needs to be developed. The nature of work cannot be bad, but the quality can be. Hence, quality should be the focus. The teacher needs to impact each and every child in the school individually. Talking about strategy, an individualized strategy for each child should be adopted. The chief aim should be to identify child's interest and to reinforce it. Several teachers deal with the same child in one class or the other. It helps in assimilating views about interest of a particular child from different teachers. This can make the identification process more reliable. This kind of an educational structure requires several peer level negotiations among the teachers of the school. This helps in establishing an informal culture of innovation in the school. The teacher must utilize his or her moral authority as a teacher. You as educational leaders should be against society imposing their biases on children's dreams. You should also involve parents in the loop to garner trust and then utilize your position of power to help children pursue their interest and excel in it. This was how you should think the educational system could deliver quality to children and bring authenticity to child-centric learning. Cultivation of diversity according to student interest is the key learning, and that is where the idea of concept of stages, wherein the first two are often forgotten, become important. Exposure is the first stage, followed by identification and then nurturing. The last is a long haul, but the first two set the tone for that. We will discuss more about this in the next lecture on a life cycle approach to education. Please do not forget to go through readings 1, 2 and 4 after this lecture on Harvard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, its educational implications, and also the book review on the book by Nikhil Goyal on One Size Does Not Fit All and a Student's Assessment of School. If possible, read the full book. Thank you. See you in the next lecture after you have done some background reading as suggested.